favorite console of all time. I don't know. I feel like
When I'm forced to choose, I say GameCube.
I think that's a fair pick for you. I think of a lot of your favorite games, and they're usually of that era.
Yeah. It's like that kind of, if you could only take one console that would never go out of power to an island, which console would you take? I'd take a GameCube. Like, as a silly favorite console kind of answer, not a smart answer. Like a computer to play everything.
There's like a small part of me that wants to say that I really, really love the 3DS because it kind of does a little bit of everything.
It's probably in my top 3. Like, I
Yeah.
think it's 3DS, 64, and GameCube are, like, my favorite consoles, which is why I'm always like, wow, I guess I really love Nintendo games, even though that's not how I look at it.
Because I think of, like, most of the games I like in general, and a lot of them I just... Anything that's not a Nintendo game, I just play on my computer. So I don't even, like, necessarily think of it in terms of consoles.
Yeah, except for, like, way back when I would play Spyro, etc.
Yeah, like basically ever since like the 360 generation, I have no particularly strong reason to say I like any of the PlayStation or Xbox consoles. So it ends up essentially being a question of which Nintendo console I like the most. I feel like the Switch also ends up being like an answer that would come to mind, but also it's like not really. I think mostly it's just because it's like there's a lot of consoles that you can get a lot of mileage out of by modding them. And the Switch, I feel like, finally is a Nintendo console that has that appeal built into it because so many people just ported things into it. That, like, you can just play so many good games portably. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, that's why I kind of said that, like, you know, I'd bring a GameCube to an island, except actually, that's not what I'd pick, because I could probably play most of my favorite games on something else.
Yeah.
Like the Switch. That just puts everything on it from a bunch of different places, like Katamari and stuff.
Mine is probably the OG Xbox, but GameCube is solid. I think that's a fair answer for pretty much the same. I feel like the OG Xbox and the GameCube had pretty similar energy to them. And it was mostly just kind of like which games you liked from either console.
Which is why my brother was like, I need an Xbox. And I was like, well, I need a GameCube.
Yeah.
I feel like we were lucky though. We had most consoles growing up, and we only missed a couple. Like, I don't think I ever had a Dreamcast. I used one when I was like older.
Dreamcast was my first experience. What's it called? With console modding, piracy and stuff. Not because I owned one, but because I just like my mom happened to be friends with somebody at the time.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, I think I've told you this story. Or yeah, basically, my mom was friends with somebody, and I think it was like her husband. Like basically, what would happen is I'd like go over to the house sometimes because I was also like friends with her son. At least in the little kid way, where I don't even remember what his name is today, but we did at least hang out at the time. But the most memorable thing about us hanging out that I remember is that their dad was like, in retrospect, now that I'm like remembering his setup and everything, was definitely like a early mid-2000s turbo nerd in a way that like I had never really seen in my life before. And he had a Dreamcast, and he very clearly like not only had like a bajillion pirated games for it, but also had like ROMs and emulators and stuff on it. And I remember it was very strange. It wasn't particularly good emulation. And the part that stuck out to me that my little kid brain had no way to explain was that the emulator was running Sonic 2. Because he was like, yeah, just play a game that like sticks out to you. So I gravitated towards Sonic 2. That was one of my favorite games growing up. And when you get to Chemical Plant Zone...
Watch it.
What is it?
I want to see the end.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sonic 2 is one of my favorite games growing up. And... like, so getting to the, like, Chemical Plant Zone, like the very distinct purple water. And for some reason it was clear. And I was like, what the heck? Why is it clear? What's wrong with it?
So close.
Oh, yeah. I forget why, but I had a reason to remember the, what was it, Yoshi's Island DS thing that I actually had growing up. I don't know why I was so motivated to get that game, but I was really excited for it. And I remember it being really good, but I don't know if I finished it.
I even got the guidebook for that game.
I remember that. That's still floating around somewhere, I think. Unless we threw that out for whatever reason. Oh, yeah.
I just would never. One of those weird favorite objects where even though it's not one of my favorite games, the walkthrough is one of my favorite objects.
Yeah. Those are cool in general. I never really owned many walkthroughs growing up, but kind of wish
Our grandma would buy them.
Aw, that's...
She's like, oh, you like this game, I got you the guide.
And you're like, thanks, I beat it, but...
Oh, they came in handy big time for Ocarina of Time.
Oh, that's cool.
Because me and my brother actually got stuck in that game.
I think one of the funniest things is the last time that I ever bought, or I didn't buy it, but our friend Ryan bought it. We have the Smash Wii U guidebook, which is mostly extremely funny because, like, all that's really there in the guidebook, because that game had, like, barely any single-player content, is, excruciating detail on all of the characters' moves that immediately got patched to be different.
Oh my god.
So, it is just such a functionally useless guidebook. Like, it probably wouldn't have been great anyway. Like, those kind of guides are the things that take, like, a community months of playing the game to, like, really get down, like, what's useful and what's not in a character's kit. So the thought of, like, just some random that was, like, designated to make a guide for the game, making something half-decent is, like, already kind of funny. But then the fact that they had to make this big, beautifully printed book only for it to immediately get outdated as soon as the game started getting patches is just even funnier. I'm gonna think if I unironically, like, any guides in this game. But I feel like by the time I, like, would have started needing them for anything was, like, around the time that the internet was a thing.
Right, like, I didn't need them actually often, ever.
Yeah.
Like, I think they came in handy for, like, 2 or 3 really stuck spots and then just mostly fun facts.
Right?
Like, it was like, oh, interesting, I didn't know.
I feel like it's, like... Now, thinking back on them, they're interesting more as, like, an art piece than they are as, like, an actual thing.
Yeah.
And I, like, wish I thought of them more like that at the time.
Yeah. It's like how I got that sea chart poster for Wind Waker, and I was like, this is a really good object, I can't leave this behind.
Yeah, I think, like, my history with the, with, like, gaming events in general, like, whether it's E3 or Game Awards, whatever, is that I have a handful of friends that are, like, very on top of that kind of thing, and also know my tastes and, like, the series I like well enough that I'll just end up getting, like, a barrage of, like, hey, they announced a new game in a series you like, or this seems like it'd be cool or something.
Yeah, it's hard not to go, our experts have it handled.
I don't think I've missed a single game event in a few years. I love watching that kind of stuff. I feel like I do. I have fun watching them when I do get around to watching them. But with the bad luck of it usually timing out with my work schedule, and then just the fact that it's like... I'm tuned out of the mainstream gaming industry enough that there ends up being a bunch of random stuff that it's, like, definitely not my style. So I've definitely at least never been the type to, like, set aside the time for it. And, like, take the day off of work. It's E3 time, baby, like some people do. Like, I remember, like, I've had a couple of jobs where I've had, like, a bunch of people, like, take off, like, a few days straight for that kind of thing, and I'm like, I can't imagine caring that much about it, but it is really fun to tune into, so I, like, get it. I feel like almost the entirety of my exposure to GoldenEye as a franchise is just how much it was parodied in cartoons growing up. I feel like there's a bunch of stuff like that where, like, just media, and I mean, we're doing, like, you know, people who are making cartoons and stuff today are doing the same exact thing to kids of today, where, like, when I was growing up, cartoons were constantly referencing stuff like 007 and... Whoa! fucking, like, I don't know, Gilligan's Island. And now in a lot of cartoons today, you'll see like a bunch of references to like N64 games and stuff like that. I think the second or third game I ever played, so it's part of me now. Yeah, no, that's fair. And that's what it is for like a lot of people. I think a lot of people like that game, even if they don't care even a little bit about the GoldenEye franchise. Gex, yeah. Hey, well, yeah, no, Gex is like pretty much the perfect example of that, like distilled. Or practically the entire point of that game is just to reference stuff that nobody cares about anymore. It is something that's fun about going back to those old cartoons, is like, back in the day, I was just kind of like, I don't get what's going on, but whatever, I guess. Or at the end of the day, it just started to feel like a slurry of everybody referencing the same thing, where it's like, I almost feel like I vicariously experienced a bunch of franchises just because of how many things parodied them. Which, to this day, is still how I feel about stuff like Star Wars and stuff. Like, it's kind of in the same basket for me personally, even though it is something that's still pretty relevant. Shout out to The Matrix. Oh my god, yeah. That was like one of the few that were like contemporary at the time, at least. Which, like, might as well have been in the same boat for me, because I still haven't seen The Matrix, even though I know it's something that's worth watching eventually. But, I at least knew that it was a more contemporary reference. As opposed to GoldenEye stuff where I was like, yep, I guess this is the Jimmy Neutron Spy episode. Lord, these faces and hands, I know.
You don't get any interference.
I remember, growing up, like, for the most part, I thought that games like, Ocarina of Time and stuff like that all looked phenomenal. But I remember, like, the two things that always used to bug me visually about that game was, one, the way that, like, the stairs looked, because they were just, like, slopes with a texture on it, and, like, even my little kid brain that wasn't getting past, I was like, those look weird. Those aren't stairs, are they? And then the other one is that I always remember imitating the fact that, characters' hands in that game, it was just like a thumb, and then the four fingers were all like connected as part of their model, which is like obviously super valid when it comes to having to design models back in the day. Like, it's a really smart way to go about it, so there's, you know, less polygons going on. Why are their hands like mittens? And then like I just like would start like doing it with my own hands. I'm like, that's weird. Especially because in Ocarina of Time they did like a lot of like tapping with their four fingers. So it's just like a very video gamey motion that, like, you know, I didn't understand the technicality behind back in the day. And now for Perfect Dark Zero. I was like, I'm curious about it, but I don't know if I'm like, I don't know if I'm that curious about it. There's one genuinely great thing, the song Limelight. Bringing up the song in a different monitor. You know, this is still pretty fitting for the credits. I'm here for it. Oh, lyrics. Post it in chat in case anyone wants it. What was I gonna say? Song from the club mission. Club missions always have really good music. It's like they're trying to do like homages to club music, but then end up actually making fantastic club music. The two that usually come to my mind at this point are the classic, also rare game. Conker has like the sandstorm-ass club music. It gets more sandstormy. There we go. And then one song I actually got like kind of obsessed with for a little while is the newer Deus Ex games. What the hell's the city called? The Hive, that's what it's called. The Hive club music is really good. This one? Yeah, there we go. There it goes. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, one thing I did think was funny, which both happened yesterday and maybe even today, and it happened after the like Sega announcement happened, was because of the way like trending stuff on Twitter works. It was like, oh, Knights is trending on Twitter with 50k tweets, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure that there are 500,000 million tweets that are talking about Nights into Dreams right now. But no, it's just because when it like Twitter literally just picks up on every single tweet that says the word like Nights in it, which could mean like, wow, we're stuck for another night at the airport. But it was just funny because like it still like abbreviates it as like Nights because it knows that, you know, in a creepy social media way, it knows that I'm looking for Nights into Dreams, but it's just pulling every tweet that just says the word Nights. Nights at the museum, exactly. Thank you for playing my favorite game. Absolutely, it's one of my favorite games too. I'm a huge fan of both this game and the sequel. I actually played the sequel first, which I've told this story before, but it was a long time ago. Also, welcome on in. Merry Christmas. I played Journey of Dreams first, and it's because one of the songs in it, I found the soundtrack before I actually played the game. Also, I'll freak my computer out a second to play the song. So I downloaded the Knight's Journey of Dreams and the Nights into Dreams soundtrack. And I liked a lot of the soundtrack in general, but specifically this song. I just think this song is like really beautiful, and I got really obsessed with like listening to a lot of the soundtrack at the time, but specifically I'd loop this song like a ton. And just I actually had a dream that visualized what I thought that this stage was going to look like, which is probably the first and only time something like that has really happened to me like that, where my brain like latched onto something like that and was like, wow, you're thinking about this like beautiful, like carnival casino looking Sega stage. And when I actually got to the stage in game, it looked nothing like that, which was a little disappointing. But it was still just like, it felt like a call to action. Like, oh, I'm literally having a dream about a Nights into Dreams song. I should probably go ahead and play this game.